Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 6.
Okay, so hear me out. Welcome back to another video, and I'm just going to be up front. This team is going to be one of the bottom tier ones. However, it is very gimmicky, and sometimes it works out in places that you wouldn't expect it to. So we're going to be on a bit of a wild one here today. So as you can see, half of the Pokemon that we have here are Paradox Pokémon adjacent in Delibird, Amoonguss, and Wigglytuff. And then we have 3 Pokemon that are Paradox adjacent in the way that they could kind of be, like, if their designs were that they had Quark Jive and there were like Pokemon that looked kind of like them in some other way, they could be Paradox Pokemon. Like if there was just like a red bird, I don't know what Bastiodon could be. I mean, I guess Bastiodon is a fossil, so that's like Paradox adjacent in that way. And then Bronzong is kind of, I mean, he kind of looks like a robot. But let's get into the actual battle strategy that we have. Here. Starting off with Iron Digit, the Porygon Z, we have a choice spec set with Hyper Beam and Tri Attack to do massive amounts of normal type damage, and we also have the Shadow Ball to make it so that we can at least hit ghost types with the Porygon Z, and we have Trick so that we can put our choice specs onto things, which will come up in one of the later sets as being useful to brick Pokemon that, like Amoonguss, are very good at doing one thing with one kind of move and don't benefit from the choice specs really at all. But with Porygon Z's adaptability, which makes it so that stab is hitting absolutely crazy with the choice specs, you can one-hit KO so many things with Hyper Beam. So many things. Even like a good number of steel types will take like 90% from Porygon Z Hyper Beam. And then I do have normal Terra on this set, however you could argue running Ghost Terra, or maybe Fighting Terra if you wanted to be Fighting Terra Terra Blast. I'm not really looking to optimize this set too much, but the whole purpose of Porygon Z is that we can take out at least one Pokemon like kind of immediately. Next up we have Christmas Bundle, the Delibird, whose set is kind of tanky. I mean, we're kind of fast because keeping up with Iron Bundle, we're going to be using Fake Out and Ice Shard, which have priority, and are pretty good disrupting tools, and also allow us to get Focus Sashes on things that Porygon Z couldn't previously KO. It just allows Delibird to come in and maybe pick off a Focus Sash or something like that, and then get knocked out for the later parts of the strategy. But we also have the moves Freeze Dry and Air Slash, just as like some decent type coverage moves that we can maybe deal like a 2-ko into specific things. Like Freeze Dry is nice for Pelipper, and Air Slash is nice for Hisui and Decidueye, who runs around in this format. Next up we have Iron Ringing, the Bronzong, and this Bronzong is designed to be a bit of a special tank set that the EVs could be better adjusted for, because this is our first Iron Defense Body Press Mon, so the whole purpose of Iron Defense and Body Press is that ideally, with the Porygon Z and the Delibird working together, we can get rid of all the other special attackers in the battles, so that we only have to deal with physical attackers. So once we get some Iron Defenses on Bronzong, that it will be able to survive more over time, that we can win the end game in that way. And Bronzong is actually pretty good at countering some specific Pokemon in this format, like the Ursaluna Blood Moon, who only has normal type moves, and Steel is resisted by normal. And normally whenever you have a Steel type, it's weak to the ground type moves. However, we have Levitate on Bronzong, which makes us immune to them, which is pretty handy. And if I was to go back and remake this set, I would definitely change Skill Swap for the Foul Play. I guess we don't have Foul Play, I thought we did. I guess we do have Payback, and Bronzong is pretty slow, so maybe instead I would run Payback. Actually with the Terra Dark to negate things like being weak to Ghost, for example. We also have the Trick Room options, because a lot of Pokemon on this team, other than Iron Digit and Christmas Bundle, are pretty slow. Next up, we have Sleepy Bonnet, who is unapologetically like the best replacement for Paradox, because Amoonguss is like, I'd say maybe one of 3 Pokemon that are actually better than their Paradox forms. But this is a pretty simple Amoonguss set here. We have the Spore to put things to sleep, we have the Rage Powder to redirect attacks away from like the Porygon Z or one of our Body Press users whenever they're starting to get set up. And then we also have the Clear Smog to get rid of opponent's boost on things like Dondozo. Like, Dondozo's kind of hard to beat with this team, especially if your Porygon Z goes down. And then we have the Terra Dark on Amoonguss just so it is closer to Brute Bonnet, but also Terra Dark is nice because it means that you can't be prankstered. Next up, we got Craggy Face, the Bastiodon, or at least the name that I tried to come up with for Bastiodon, if it was a Paradox Pokemon. And this Bastiodon is super simple. We're just doing Iron Defense Body Press shenanigans again, except this time we have the Chesto Resto in order to get all of our health back, and we have the Protect to maybe stall out an extra turn. And on this Bastiodon set, I picked the Soundproof ability because Soundproof can get you out of some scenarios where, for example, Primarina is kind of popular in the format right now, and Primarina's main Water-type move is Hyper Voice, which you would be immune to, so it negates one of your weaknesses. And Soundproof as an ability also combos with our Wigglytuff set, because our main purpose of Wigglytuff is to go for the Perish Song. So we have an endgame where we want to have Craggy Face and Singtail both on the field. We can Perish Song, and then Craggy Face won't be affected by the Perish Song, and the opponent has to knock it out in 3 turns. So if we only have physical attackers left on the field, or Pokemon that can't deal a lot of damage, we can really solidify that endgame as long as Wigglytuff can get off the Perish Song. And as for the other moves, we have Alluring Voice just to deal some damage, but to keep things from also setting up on us, as well as we have the Heal Pulse to heal up our Body Press Mons if they get too low or maybe need an extra turn, as well as we have the Cute Charm ability, which gives a 30% chance to infatuate the opposite gender, which can give us an extra turn to stall if we need an extra turn of Perish Song. And we have the Safety Goggles item so that we can't be put to sleep by Amoongusses, but I think that you could trade out the Safety Goggles for a Focus Sash instead, since nothing on this team is using the Focus Sash, maybe like a Terra Grass. And then our EVs are just kind of random bar wiggling, however, it is better if you can get your speed to be as low as possible, so that way if Wigglytuff is the last Pokemon left on your team and you are going for Perish Song, that based on the turn order, you will win the game if every Pokemon faints from Perish Song, as long as your Pokemon that faints from Perish Song is the slowest on the field. But yeah, that's the basic synopsis of how this team works, and I figured out the way that I want to iterate on teams is if they win like 6 out of 10 battles, or at least I feel like I have a good 6 battles that represent how this team works, and maybe show like a few of the battles that I want to show are just like the definite team losses, or maybe how you can play better into ways that this team definitely loses to other teams, because this team definitely loses to like Goldango most of the time, unless you can get your Porygon Z to Shadow Ball into it. But I had to iterate on this team 3 times, I think, because I went like 4 and 10 in wins with this team, but then we got 6 really good battles out of like 8 battles in the last set of attempts that I had, so let's get into those, because some of them are pretty interesting, if I do say so myself. Okay, so first up here, we had what at first I thought was a stall team because it uses Garganacl. However, some elements of this team are pretty offensive. Like we have the Blood Moon, Ursaluna, and the Alolan Golem. So let's just play this one out and see what happens. They start a Rongaroo, Ursaluna, and I think that based on what I lead, like Trick Room doesn't really benefit either of us too much here because we both have Trick Room pieces, sure, but I really want my Porygon to beat every one of their Pokemon, and they really want to get rid of my Pokemon so that their Ursaluna can ruin a lot of my Pokemon. But Bronzong is the main Pokemon keeping Ursaluna from beating everything. So Ursaluna protects on the first turn, but I decided to just Hyper Beam into a Rongaroo because I don't really want to have to deal with it, as we get an Iron Defense on Bronzong, and they bring in the Dusclops, which is a Pokemon that I really didn't want to see here because it means that Body Press endgame is not viable. However, their Ursaluna Terra Normals, as we recharge from the Hyper Beam that we just used, Hyper Voice comes out, and it doesn't do too much damage, but Body Press does a lot of crit damage to them, but I don't think that crit ends up mattering because of the play during the rest of the game. However, the opponent does get up Trick Room, and they're actually shown to be Room Service Ursaluna, which does change a few things here, because a lot of my Pokemon that are maybe slower than it inside of Trick Room are no longer maybe as guaranteed to be as slow as Ursaluna. I decided to bring in Bastiodon as Ursaluna decides to protect again, and Dusclops is trying to get rid of Bronzong by going for Curse damage over time, and I don't really want Bastiodon to get taken out because I know that I can, at least as long as I get rid of Ursaluna, I have Wigglytuff in the back for Perish Song endgame. So it's just a matter of time until we can get out Wigglytuff in order to do the Perish Song endgame on the Amoonguss and the Dusclops that are left, to invert the Trick Room with our own Bronzong here, and we're just kind of stalling for as long as I can with Bastiodon, because Bastiodon does have Rest, so the Curse and the Will-O-Wisp and Spore really isn't that much of an issue since we're Chesto Resto. We can rest at least one time, but now that we have Wigglytuff in here, I Terra Normal Wigglytuff just in case an Amoonguss Sludge Bomb does target into that slot, which I didn't think was super likely, but it is possible. We burn our Terra Normal here, and we get off the Perish Song, and we're immune to the Perish Song with our Craggy Face. So at this point, we just have to keep Craggy Face alive. We get to rest off the damage that we've taken because of Curse, and then wake up, and then heal Pulse side targets just in case the Amoonguss was going to try and do some damage in between the rest turns. But we're just good at this point, and the opponent understands that, so they decide to forfeit. Next up, we have a game against a lot of fast pieces here, with the Hisuian Electrode and possibly the Annihilate being like Final Gambit. But they also have maybe Trick Room and Hatterene, so let's just let this one play out and we'll see what happens. They lead in Hatterene and Incineroar as I lead Porygon and Amoonguss. Now they decide to fake out into Porygon, which is perfectly fine. I clear Smog Hatterene for some damage at least as its stats gets reset, and they flat out Expanding Force into Amoonguss without having a side terrain user, but Amoonguss survives it, which is good. We're going to protect Amoonguss again here. They protect Hatterene. And I wanted to Shadow Ball down Hatterene, but unfortunately I didn't get it as they tried to Flare Blitz into there. But Shadow Ball takes out Hatterene this time, which is important as Flare Blitz deals damage to Incineroar. So now it is a 3v3 fight. However, I need to get off the Perish Song in order to beat Annihilate, who is one of the big Pokemon that are really hard to defeat. Like, I don't think this team has a really good way to beat Mouse Ape consistently. Like, it depends on how your Porygon and Amoonguss lead works out, but Annihilate by itself is definitely less of a problem, as they Terra Fire, but we Terra Grass, and they try to Drain Punch for the quad effective. However, Bastiodon is just so tanky that it does not care, as Craggy Face gets off the defense boost. So now we have Craggy Face at a point where it is really hard to remove. Pollen Puff will do some damage, but not enough to warrant us being too concerned. As we get off a Perish Song, they do still have Incineroar in the back. However, if they do decide to bring in Incineroar, we can safely Body Press into Incineroar now that the Annihilate has decided to waste the Terra. We can Heal Pulse, Bastiodon back up, and get Bastiodon all the way to having its defenses maxed out. We also have Porygon Z still, so they decided to switch out Amoonguss for Annihilate here, but because now we have Porygon Z on the field who can Hyper Beam freely and is faster than everything else, we get to guarantee a KO, which makes it even easier to get off the Perish Song endgame. They fake out because they don't understand how fake out works, I guess, but it doesn't really change anything now that we landed the fake out, and Body Press actually KOs Annihilate, so we don't super need... I guess it negates getting a crit in the Perish Song endgame, but with the Perish Song endgame, we have an easy way to beat Amoonguss. Coming up against a bit of a wheezing team here with Slaking. Glimmora is also hard to deal with. Bastiodon wants to Terra Grass, and then Glimmora is a special attacker, so it can be kind of hard to remove with Porygon Z since it resists Porygon Z. But let's see how this one plays out. So I believe they lead with Weezing and Slaking here. Yeah, they lead Weezing, Slaking. I don't really want Slaking on the field, so I just decided to Hyper Beam into it and it dies. But I actually didn't know about this interaction here. They taunted the Porygon Z, which I don't really care about, but I tried to skill swap the Weezing so that I can take its neutralizing gas and then leave with it so that I can have abilities active again. However, as I found out, you can't skill swap the neutralizing gas, which... I mean, I guess it was an interesting plan, and there's not much else that Bronzong could have done during that turn. But we get Earth Powered here because abilities are currently turned off, and Sludge Bomb comes into Porygon Z, and it does get a Poison, which is rather unsatisfying as we get in Amoonguss, who would have eaten the Toxic Spikes if Glimmora was Toxic Spikes, and Hyper Beam gets to be faster than Glimmora, so we get to get rid of that. Even though it terrestrialized to not resist the Hyper Beam, I think with Glimmora's, I mean, maybe it depends how you train the Glimmora, but even with the resistance, I still think Hyper Beam would have easily KO'd Glimmora there, as Porygon Z has kind of done its job, and now we have Craggy Face in the back, and the opponent kind of understands that they can't beat Craggy Face. Even if we probably didn't have Wigglytuff in the back, there's no... Well, I guess actually Weezing's neutralizing gas would negate the soundproof, however, Craggy Face and Amoonguss can definitely handle the Whimsicott. And then I don't think Weezing can remove any of these 3 pieces that we have left, so we could just switch around to get rid of the Perish Songs and eventually Weezing would die. Next up, we have a bit of a rain team here with Pelipper, but also the Mimikyu as an interesting pick on this team. Leading into this team, they bring Archaludon and Mimikyu, which is not such a great matchup for Porygon Z, as Mimikyu is a ghost type, so we would have to hit them with Shadow Ball, but they also have a guaranteed way to tank 2 hits with their Disguise ability, so it can be really hard to make Porygon Z make it into the 2v2 scenario that we want in the back. However, they decided to switch Amoonguss out for Pelipper, which I'm perfectly fine with, as they go with Grass Terra on Archaludon to avoid being spored by the Amoonguss, or to avoid the Rage Powder redirecting the Electro Shot that I think that they were going to go for here. But we just Hyper Beam into that slot because I was pretty okay with dealing Hyper Beam's worth of damage into the Archaludon anyways, as we get to clear Smog into Pelipper that was trying to break Mimikyu's substitute. However, now we're in a game where we have to get Hyper Beam back off. They decide to Weather Ball here into Amoonguss, maybe thinking I wouldn't Rage Powder. As Mimikyu tries to curse down Amoonguss, and we're seeing a lot of curse games in this set, actually. Hyper Beam gets to take out Pelipper, so now we're in the 2v4 scenario right now, actually, where Mimikyu is asleep, so Mimikyu won't be guaranteed to do anything. And thankfully, it is Amoonguss in the back, who, even if this was Basculegion at this point, I think we would still be able to beat Basculegion since we haven't used our terrestrialization, and it's going to be much easier to stall out Rain at this point. But Porygon recharges as they just decide to put our Porygon Z to sleep, but that's not the real Pokemon that we're concerned about at this point. And I'm just clicking Rage Powder to try and get Amoonguss off the field so that we can get up our body presses, because it is still possible that the Mimikyu has Drain Punch in its move pool, which would be kind of annoying if we want to get rid of it. But I bring in Wigglytuff here because I don't think Wigglytuff's in too much of a threat with Mimikyu and Amoonguss on the field unless there was like a Sludge Bomb or something. And I want to get off our Perish turns as fast as possible so that we can end the game. They play rough in the Porygon Z, but I'm fine with that as they Spore into Wigglytuff. However, we are safety goggles so it doesn't go through, and now everything is on a timer. They decide to knock out Porygon Z before it can wake up, but a Alluring Voice is going to break Mimikyu's substitute if it was going to go for like a Sword Stance or something like that to maybe have a better way to break through Bastiodon. But everything on the field is now at 2 turns, so I Terra Grass to make sure that I don't get Drain Punch. They just play rough into a Steel type, which I guess is fine. I did Hyper Beam into a Steel type earlier. But this turn guarantees that we get to win the game, because on the next turn, Bastiodon is just going to Protect, and they futilely just try to attack into Bastiodon as everything except for Bastiodon on the field faints. Next up we have, oh, this is a good one. Alright, we're just gonna let this play out here. I start Porygon Z, and we have Delibird here, who I definitely led Delibird more often than I thought I did, but this is the first time that's come up, so maybe all the games where I was leading Delibird I was losing, because I was leading Delibird. But this is kind of convenient for us because Delibird gets to fake out into Espathra, and we can start having Porygon Z get rid of things. Delibird does go down here, but it's perhaps better that that happens. They just Temper Flared with their Salamence, even though I very easily could have just clicked Ice Shard into Salamence here, but I guess they didn't consider that one. As the Terra Normal Tri-Attack takes out Salamence, and we are now in a 3v3. Flamigo comes in and it gets to copy the Speed Boost off of Espathra, which I definitely did not think about. And I immediately switch into Wigglytuff in order to maybe catch a close combat, but the close combat actually goes into Craggy Face, which I was not expecting. But at this point, I need them to mess up, and I believe that they actually do that here, because they close combat into Wigglytuff for whatever reason. But this gives me a big enough opening where I can Tri-Attack into Espathra, and that gets the paralysis on it, and the Alluring Voice from Singtail picks up the KO into Flamigo. Perhaps they were thinking that I was going to protect with the Porygon Z, not knowing that I was Choice Specs, but now we are in a battle against Espathra and Rillaboom, and because we're normal Terra with Porygon Z, all I need to do is land the Tri-Attack into Rillaboom, and it probably should pick up KO. They fake out in the Porygon Z, and they Lumina Crash into Wigglytuff to try and KO it, so everything is fully within Lumina Crash range right now, because we have the special defense drop. I decide to Perish Song here, because if we can get out of this with Perish Song, might as well try it at least. We can count on the Paraturns maybe from Espathra not being able to hit the Pokemon. I protect with Singtail here as they try to Lumina Crash into it. And they are speedy Rillaboom. Like, as we saw, Porygon Z is 142 speed right now, and Rillaboom maxes out at 150, which means that they're positive speed nature Rillaboom, which I was not expecting. I was totally counting on being able to pick up the KO on Rillaboom this turn with our Terra Normal Choice Specs Tri-Attack. However, that doesn't go through, as now they just KO, and I'm not quite sure what to do at this point in the game. Like, the game is pretty much over. I go for the Protect again, and we get the double Protect onto Wigglytuff, and Rillaboom attacks. I'm like, well, might as well go for the triple Protect. And then Wigglytuff faints last, and we win the game, which is epic. I laughed so hard after that battle. Wigglytuff, high skill gameplay right there. Okay, and last is the popular Rain team that's been running around, which has a Goldango and Basculegion on it, and I'm gonna flat out say that I lose this battle. However, I don't lose this battle as close as I thought I did for some reason that I forget. We start with Iron Digit and Christmas Bundle here, and I fake out into the Overqwil because I think the Overqwil just wants to explode with its Swift Swim. Pelipper goes for the Wide Guard so that it doesn't get hit by the Overqwil's explosion, and I go for Tri-Attack into the Pelipper, but the Pelipper's Focus Sash on this team, so it lives. And then I figure they are going to go for the explosion this turn, so I get the Ice Shard into Pelipper, which knocks it out, and they do go for the explosion. Craggy Face resisted, which is nice, but now they bring in Basculegion and Goldango, and another specific reason why Goldango counters this team that I've made is not only because of Body Press, but the ability Good as Gold makes you immune to Perish Song, so even if we could get off the Perish Song here with a Wigglytuff, we would have to figure out how to get over Goldango, which is getting in Porygon Z again in order to Shadow Ball it down, so we'd have to stall out the other turns of Rain here. They go Terra Water on their Basculegion. I protect with Singtail and Craggy Face, because we just need to hold out for just long enough, and their Goldango is going for Trick, and if they're tricking into Wigglytuff, I'm pretty okay with that. However, they decide to not trick into Wigglytuff. They instead Wave Crash into Wigglytuff, giving me a bit of the switch up here. And if I had gone for Body Press into Basculegion on this turn, I think there might have been a chance that I could have KO'd it, which means that Porygon Z would have been able to beat Goldango on this next turn. But I Iron Defense, and I'm now locked into Iron Defense for the rest of the game since I was tricked the Choice Specs. Wave Crash comes out into Porygon Z, and that knocks it out. Brings Basculegion like super low, and Shadow Ball comes out from Goldango. But at this point, the game is over, so we take the last respects and we get knocked out. So yeah, super close, realistically. I think I could have realized that maybe the Goldango was going to trick the Choice Specs into Bastiodon. I keep wanting to call it Craggy Face, however, I've definitely called it Craggy Face too many times in this video. I really thought they were going to try and Wave Crash into Bastiodon to try and get rid of it, but maybe on that turn they thought that I would Terrestrialize after the Protect since I knew which slot they were going to attack into. But it just happens. So yeah, that's the Paradox Pokemon at Home team. I hope you at least found it somewhat enjoyable. I mean, I think it's a nice little tech strategy that we get Porygon Z to KO things, and then just hope that we can get the Perish Song off with our soundproof ability. Like, whenever I was making all of these mons, that was a nice little synergy that I found with Bastiodon and Wigglytuff. So it kind of became the crux of the entire team, but if I was to change the team in any way, is that we need actual Dark-type damage on something. which I guess skill swap has mostly been kind of useless, so let's just put payback on Bronzong, and we'll call it there. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you very much.